And in this PHP security tutorial I'm going to briefly explain a problem with, a common problem that sometimes comes up with including files, and if you allow your user to control which file is included, that can sort of bring up quite a serious security issue. So what we've got here to demonstrate this problem is a very simple template system. So you see we have this URL here, it ends in index.php, which is this actual page file that we're accessing, and then it sends a get variable for page equals login.php, and then our index.php file, which is this, checks to see if that get variable exists, and if it does, it tries to include that file. So login.php goes sort of here basically, so we're including pages/login.php, and this pages folder just has the single login.php file in it, and the code of that is here, and it's just the form that you can see on the page. So this is essentially a sort of very simplified, a very simple templating system. And the problem with this is, though, that there's no validation of this input from the user. I mean, they could include any file with this. So, for example, if we just change this to include, let's say, register, which doesn't exist, register, not that it really matters, we get this error saying that PHP can't find the file, which is obvious because it doesn't exist. But this tells us, as the attacker, the path that is being included, pages/register.php. So you can then use this to include any file, even a file that isn't a PHP file. If you include a PHP file, the PHP code will be processed as PHP, and it will it'll run, which is something you don't want, and I'll mention that a little bit more in a moment. But you can also include a file that's not a PHP file. For example, if we go up one directory from the pages folder, and then we can just keep going up like I've got in that sort of spoiler you can see there. What this will do is, because you can just add loads of these, and if you add enough you'll get to the sort of root of the server, so it'll be sort of, just a /, not in any folder. And if you try and go up from there by adding another double dot and a slash, you'll just stay in the same folder because you can't go above the root. So you just add loads of these, and then you'll end up in the root of the server, and then etc/password, and you can see you get this sort of weird looking output here. And what this actually is the contents of a file on the server that nobody should really be able to access. Obviously, if you have access to the server, you can view this file yourself, but people sort of outside of the server shouldn't be able to get access to it. To be honest, this isn't particularly useful. The information that you can get from this is a list of all of the server's users and their home folders. So this could potentially show you like what websites are hosted on the server and that kind of thing. It's not massively useful, although it does highlight the problem quite nicely, because this is a file that nobody should be able to access via a web interface ever. I mean, you're not really supposed to even edit it. So yeah. Another more serious problem is that the same sort of vulnerability opens up a the potential for the attacker or someone bad to run random any PHP code they want on your server. And obviously then they can upload their own files, they can delete your files, edit any pages. So basically what they can do then is fairly limitless. I mean, that's like the worst way of getting attacked, if someone managed to upload a file or run PHP code, not any code. And the way that works is because every time you browse to a page that's on your server, the actual web server, Apache, will make a log of the fact that that request has been made and served. It's usually used for stats and that kind of thing, but sort of debugging and that sort of stuff, server admin stuff. But the problem is that, so for example, if I just browse to that page like that, we get this error, but it doesn't matter. This string here will be written to a file. But if I were to browse to, say, PHP info, hit enter, now this entire string here has been written to a file, and because that file won't really have any other PHP code in it, the attacker type bad person can then include that log file, and PHP will get to this point here and it will run it. So it doesn't. These files generally have like tens of thousands of lines in them. But it doesn't necessarily matter that that the PHP process is quite fast at that kind of thing. So it basically they can then run any sort of arbitrary PHP code just by doing this. And then obviously they could have this code as like eval function or something, or they could download a file and save it locally that allows them to do other more complex sort of bad things. So what we need to do to prevent this causing problems is validate this input. Now if we just go back to say this original example of this, what we could do is check to make sure that this variable doesn't have any dots or slashes in it. However, that would not stop the problem of the PHP one, which I can't seem to find, because that doesn't have a dot or a slash. So according to that simple validation, it would still it would have passed and it'd still be included. One thing you can do though is list the contents of this pages folder and then check to see if the variable is in that list. That is basically impossible to fool or to bypass, because there's no way the attacker can influence that list of files, and even if they could, all they'd be able to do really is include another file. So what we're going to do to fix this problem is go to our index.php page, and just here we're going to add a print _r of a new function called scan_dir. And what this function does is open a directory, list all of the files and folders in that directory, and then return all of those as an array. So you can use it to get a list of the pages, essentially. So if we scan dir, the pages folder, like so, and print _r just prints out an array in a way that sort of people can see sort of clearly, you know, what's in the array. So if we reload our page now, just hit enter. Actually, let's remove this variable so we don't get all this output. See, we get this list of 3 elements in the array, so we get 3 files, or well, folders, entries. So we get the dot, which just means the current directory, the double dot, which just means up a directory, and then the file name, which in this case is login.php. So what we can do now is check the get variable against this list to see if what they entered is one of the valid pages. So if we go back to our index.php, we can add after the is set another check, so and in array, which will check if the first parameter is in the second parameter, the first parameter being basically anything, and the second parameter being an array of things of the same format as the first parameter, which hopefully makes sense. So we're going to check if in array get page, and the array we want to check is the scan_dir. So we can just use this function in line here. So I'll just copy this and paste it there, hit save, and now if we go back to our page and just hit reload, nothing happens because there's no get variable. But if we add the get variable like we had before, so we get no output, which means that the file hasn't been included. And what you could do is say go back to the index.php page, and you could add an else statement here to say like echo that page could not be found, or something along those lines. So if we reload this now, we see we get this page cannot be found error. Let's just remove this print _r, because that was there just for debugging or demonstration. So now when we see this message, it means that the file that we've tried to enter can't be included. But there is another problem with this, because if you remember, the dot and the double dot were also in the array. So if we just include double dot, hit enter, so we get this error, because this is actually trying to include a folder. You see, because this is the folder that I'm working in here, pages, but up one from pages is this file includes folder, and that's actually what's trying to be included, I guess, if that makes sense. And obviously that can't work, because you can't include a directory. That just doesn't make any sense. So what you could do is store the result of this scan_dir in a variable. Like say if we just cut this and say just here for the example, we'll just define a new variable called pages. And because the dot and the double dot are always going to be the first 2 elements, we can just do unset just to remove them. We can do unset pages 0, and pages 1, which will just remove the first 2 elements from the array. Then obviously here we just need to use the pages variable, like so, and hit reload, and you can see now we get the page could not be found. But if we go back to our login.php, that seems to be included, well, that is included as we expect. So that's a way to secure your file, your include lines, essentially. You just need to make the sort of, this is a general tip really, except it applies to file, file includes. You always need to make sure that if the input from the user goes into like your program, so if it's written to the database or if it is used to include a file or to decide which file is being included, you always need to make sure you validate it in a way that can't be tricked. You always need to like think sort of what could happen. Like say, like when we defined that get variable, you need to be thinking, instead of just thinking, oh, that'll include that file that I want, it'll be what will happen if someone types in something else. What could they potentially do? So that's basically it for this anyway, so thanks for watching, and hopefully this was pretty useful.